When it sits right, it sits right. And of course, everyone might argue until you've done it wrong, but well, I was there. I got up at what time? I did the pre-light. I selected the gels.
Once we've wrapped, I have a bit of a hiatus in that the director and the editor have to stick the picture together. And then maybe I'll go off on another job. And by the time I finish that job, they're starting to be ready to start the grading process. And that can only happen once they've locked the picture. So that's a fine cut and it's been approved.
And after that, of course, then it's the editor and then it's the director work on it, and you pop in occasionally and have a look at things like that. And your big task at the end of it is obviously the grading. And there might be something very specific, a look that might not be there when everybody's cutting it. There were rushes and they weren't quite thing, and you haven't quite found the look that filters through the whole thing. If there's a progression of colour and black and white, whatever it might be, you do it then.
I've never not made post-production. Only on Robin Hood I only did a few days on it, which I wasn't very happy with, and I didn't really like what I saw in the end. But I think it's part of the process. I've always managed to finish the post on the film, so I think it's very important to... because, if you don't do it, who else is going to do it? The editor, and I think, you were there on the day, you chose the gels, you put the lights up. If the rushes aren't quite right or the grade's not quite right, you know what it was in your mind. Surprisingly, how you can remember things, and it's also surprising when you get it look right, whether it's a negative or even modern digital image, that when it sits right, it sits right. And of course, everyone might argue until you've done it wrong, but well, I was there. I got up at what time? I did the pre-light. I selected the gels. You can tell me afterwards what you like, but you weren't there, and you're not part of that process. So I do try and ensure that those ideas come across.
My job in post-production is to oversee any visual effects and to make sure that they will marry in with all the work that we've shot, and to do the grade. And the grade is where we colour match all the pictures. So you may have shot one scene in a room, but over 3 days when the weather changed, and for instance, or shot outside and the weather's changing, and you need to, in the crudest sense, grading's about matching all those pictures so they look like they're all taken on the same day. But on a creative sense, it's about, you can change a lot, you can enhance a lot, you can make things cooler or warmer, you can take one colour and make it a different colour, you can add shadows.
You could say to somebody who grades, oh, I want this scene to be warm. Well, there's a lot of warm. There's a yellow warm, there's a magenta warm, there's all sorts of colours warm. And it's all in the subtlety. It's all in the 1 point of yellow and 1 point of magenta and a tiny bit of something else. And so the colours are actually complex. They're not just a wash of one colour. It's not like a sepia over the whole thing. It's much more complex than that. And you can't not grade your own film. It's impossible, because it's a question of taste again.
2 to 3 weeks sometimes, maybe sometimes more, sometimes stop-start, sometimes reshoots. But usually the DI process, as it's still called, is 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. Some people spend more than that, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, but I think when you're working in the DI, it should be fast, like a piece of music. You shouldn't noodle with things too much. If you noodle and you all need to say the powerful windows you can do, and you take all the kind of imperfections and all the rawness out of your work, and every image looks sort of too manipulated and do the same, and the film looks too smooth. It doesn't have any ebbs or flows or jangly bits or beautiful bits or dark bits or brighter or more glidey, soft bits. If you noodle with things too much, you fiddle with it, then you lose all your design.
You can't undo lighting, but you can subtly enhance lighting. And it's a very, very important process. It's so important that I insist on it in my contract, and that it's paid attendance at the grade. I do a lot of work when I'm shooting. I'll take stills, either with the camera or through the Alexa or Sony, whatever I'm using. If there's a facility to press a button to take a still from the camera, I'll take stills all day. At the end of the shoot, I've got a library of images taken on the set in the lighting I've used, and I can then, if I can't make the grade or I miss a few days, I can actually grade those in Lightroom or Photoshop or some online editing system. and send those to the colorist. So this is kind of what I'm thinking. I also obviously send it to the director and say, I was doing this all the way through Wolf Hall. I was grading images, sending them to Peter and said, what do you think of this? And he'd go, yeah, that's exactly the way to go. So you all the way through, you're working on the image. So when you get to the grade, which is an expensive process, the grade isn't where you start to play with looks. The grade is where you've already decided everything. You've already decided how it's going to look. It's where you apply it.
I'm on the phone every night with the dailies or with the digital files, because they're going to get, the director and the editor are going to get used to looking at the film in the editing room. So when then you go in the final process of color correcting, they'll think that's the way it should look. So I try to get it as close as possible to what I think with the dailies, and then when I get in the color correct, everybody, it reaffirms what they're looking at.
And so by that time I know, and the director knows, how we want it to look, and then with a talented colorist you use the tools at your disposal to really lift the image and make it as good as it can be.